Many people avoid graveyards and cemeteries. They remind them that none of us have forever, and that's scary. Or they've seen a scary movie, and it all creeps them out. I am not one of those people. In fact, final resting places can teach us as much about life as they do death. Not to mention stories, fascinating stories. Today we'll visit the top 10 unusual graves in southern Indiana, traveling west to east. Let's hit the road. Our first stop is at Highland Cemetery in Terre Haute, Indiana. You have to admit, the gate looks a lot like the front of Disney World. But it's here at the John Heinel Mausoleum that it all gets weird. John made his fortune in Terre Haute, and when he died in 1920, he was placed inside the family mausoleum. Local legend says that he had a bulldog that was so loyal that it came to the mausoleum every single day, up until it too passed away. The dog was then taxidermied, but instead of realistic eyes, he was given sparkling green stones that glowed when hit with a flashlight. Then it was placed inside the mausoleum with his master. Teenagers on date night would drop by the mausoleum to take a look at what they had nicknamed Stiffy Green. The loyal to the death bulldog, a legend was born. But the problem was, John Heinel never owned a bulldog. The bulldog in question was always made of concrete and was never once alive. Some say it once stood at the front of John's home as an ornament. After some vandalism, Stiffy was taken from the mausoleum. He now resides at the Vigo County Historical Society. Over 100 years later, people forget a lot of things. But man, do they ever remember John Heinel's concrete dog with the shiny green eyes. If the prospect of destroying your car's suspension is not a concern, a drive to Sullivan, Indiana will provide one of the most unusual gravestones in Indiana. There are no houses out here, and there's an unreal peace about the place. It's dead quiet, to insert a little cemetery humor. But even at a distance, you can see it. This is the gravestone of Carrie Shane Shekels. He was an avid player of Monopoly, so when he died in 2005 at 31 years old, his family created this incredible memorial. Each one of the spaces is an event in his lifetime. From schools he attended, his first car, and even places he liked to eat. I never met Carrie, but just by looking at this large gravestone, I know he was dearly loved. I know a little about the life he lived. He was just a few years younger than I am. I recognize and relate to so many things on this stone. But most of all, I know he had a true passion for the game of Monopoly. It makes you wonder, when your ticket is punched, what will people remember about you and the things you love the most? Bedford, Indiana is the limestone capital of the world. It should come as no surprise that the biggest cemetery in town, Green Hill Cemetery, is going to have some amazing stone cutting. From realistic looking trees made of stone, to what looks like a wooden bench, all made of limestone. Many of these are registered as part of the Smithsonian catalog. There are many fine works of master craftsmen. But a few truly stand out. The first is one for Louis Baker. He was a stonecutter for many years before being killed by a bolt of lightning in 1917. His fellow stonecutters built this memorial. It looks like his workbench on the day he died. But not only that, it has a replica of what he was actually working on, a building cornice. And his tools. You'll see chisels, a hammer, mallet, broom, and his shop apron. This endearing tribute shows the love of friends. I think most of us would want friends like that. The question is, are we putting in the work to earn them? In the same cemetery is the amazing Tom Barton Memorial. Tom was the chief estimator for the Indiana Limestone Company, and in his off hours, he absolutely loved the game of golf. In fact, the day he died in 1937, he just completed 18 holes at a golf course in French Lick, a full game. Tom died doing what he loved, and there's a bigger lesson here. When our last game is played, hopefully it was one worth playing. Just outside downtown Bedford is one of the stranger tales in Indiana. This is the final resting place of Dr. Winthrop Foote that passed away in 1856. An amazing man with both medical and law degrees, he's largely considered the father of the limestone industry. In a day before trains crossed the landscape, he predicted that Lawrence County limestone would be shipped across the world, and he was right. His grave is actually part of his Blue Hole quarry, but the tomb itself was cut from a single piece of limestone that fell from the neighboring hill. Very smart people are often very eccentric, especially when they have a lot of money to do whatever they want. And in this case, things got very weird. His brother Ziba died in Gibson County and was buried next to the pond where he drowned. Dr. Foote took an expedition to that place and retrieved his brother's bones. They were then buried at Old Palestine, the first capital of Lawrence County, and where Dr. Foote lived at the time. But having made this cool new tomb outside Bedford, Dr. Foote dug him up again and placed him inside, his third and final burial. Ziba and Dr. Foote would be roommates for eternity. But wait, there's more. Getting older and drinking very heavily, he then ordered the most expensive coffin in the catalog, one that looked like something from Egypt. In today's money, it would have cost over $100,000 for something that's worthless the moment you put a dead person inside. His son petitioned the court, saying his father was senile and wasting the family fortune. But Dr. Foote had a law degree, had practiced for many decades, and was incredibly skillful. Also, having delivered lots of babies and healed many people of their illnesses, his reputation in the community was sterling. His son's petition was rejected. When Dr. Foote passed away, he was reunited with his brother, already in the tomb. People saw a small box inside, and rumors circulated that he had his dog killed in order to spend the afterlife together. But that small box was all that remained of his brother Ziba. There were also rumors that he was buried with his favorite horse. This also was untrue. The horse was allowed to graze until the end of its life. But some say he was then buried next to the grave of Dr. Foote. Which just goes to show, if you have money, a big dream, and people willing to play along, about anything is possible. I like to say that true adventure starts on really bad roads, and the road to Lof Sloter's unusual grave is a rough one. This grave along the backroads of Bristol, Indiana is, well, hard to explain. Let's just go see it together. On top of his final resting place is a large, steam-powered tractor. When Linus died in 1967, it just seemed appropriate to place a large, antique piece of farm equipment on top of him. It was built at nearby Ferdinand, Indiana in the late 1800s and must have made quite the racket when you powered it up. He does have a regular monument on the ground. Plus another in front of that with his wife. But the question remains, why? I researched this one and found nothing. And you know, maybe that's the point. Keep people guessing. And that's exactly what Lof Sloter has managed to do. High above a cliff at Elizabeth, Indiana, the tomb of Captain Frank McCary overlooks the Ohio River. It's one of my favorite southern Indiana tales of all time. Born in 1805, Francis McCary had become wealthy as a steamboat captain. It's said that he had a fiery Irish temper and yelled at other captains as their boats passed on the river. It was, after all, a very competitive business. After becoming successful and having some money, he started construction of his own mausoleum high above the river that he loved. On the front of the tomb, he wanted a round window, and when he died, he wanted to be placed inside, standing up. That way, he could yell at the other steamboat captains, even in the afterlife. Captain Frank got his wish. Over the years, various tales were told about the captain, including that he'd put a curse on anyone that looked upon his grave. Riverboat captains began tooting their horns as they passed the tomb, as a sign of respect or to ward off the supposed curse. Some people claim to have seen an ominous mist inside the tomb, or simply felt a presence. The fact is, Frank's body isn't even there. A long time ago, he was moved to Cave Hill Cemetery in Louisville, Kentucky. He lays in a mausoleum with his wife, daughter, and son-in-law, leaving the original completely empty. If you go to Captain Frank's mausoleum above the river, the most likely thing that will haunt you is the police. The tomb is on private property, and the owners are very, very tired of trespassers. But the memory of Captain Frank and all his crotchety behavior has greatly outlived him, As a lesson to all of us, we should all leave a lasting impression. South of downtown Franklin, in the middle of the road, is what looks like a simple median, but it's certainly not. This is the infamous grave in the middle of the road, and it has an amazing backstory. Officially called Barnett Cemetery, it was created back when this was open country and no roads existed. Nancy Barnett had moved here with her husband William. She loved sitting along Sugar Creek, so much in fact that she asked to be buried next to it. It was a pleasant little hill overlooking the creek. And when she died at only 38 years old, William honored her wish. All was fine for over 70 years, until the county decided to put a road right through the grave. As the story goes, a family member met the construction crew with a shotgun. They decided to compromise and built the road around it. By 2016, the site had been accidentally hit by many trucks, thus requiring a remodel. State archaeologists excavated the site, but they found not one, but 7 bodies under the road. Bodies were reinterred, new concrete was poured, and now Nancy and 6 other people can rest easy again. In this life, we don't always get what we want, but sometimes we do when we ask. At DuPont, Indiana, we find a truly amazing gravestone. This is the grave of Robert Hughes that died in 2023, but not before building this monument for he and his wife. A set of giant engineering calipers, otherwise known as verniers. He was the founder and CEO of Clifty Engineering at Madison, Indiana, and these were the tools of his trade. And not only that, they're an exact duplicate of the real thing, right down to the measurements. Bob supported many worthy causes, from the fire department to boat racing on the Ohio River. We all gotta go sometime. The question is, when all is said and done, how will we measure up? The last grave on our trip is located at Aurora, Indiana, and is perhaps the strangest. This is the final resting place of Aurora Shook. At first appearances, it looks like a very humble gravestone. However, there are no other memorials around it. And that's where the crazy begins. Born in Cuba, she loved this town so much that she legally changed her name to Aurora. But she also loved her 1976 Cadillac Eldorado with a ragtop. And before she died in 1989, she asked to be buried in it. To fulfill her wish, her husband bought 14 cemetery lots in order to build a vault big enough for a Cadillac. Due to state regulations, her body couldn't just be placed in the car. So on the day of the funeral, the Cadillac was lowered into the vault, the casket was put on top of it, and then the vault was sealed. Many years later, when her husband died, he was cremated and sent down a shaft. to be with his wife in the Cadillac for eternity. Moral of the story: no matter what you manage to acquire in this life, you can't take it with you. But by all means, enjoy the ride. There are thousands of cemeteries and graveyards in southern Indiana, and countless interesting memorials to people that are no longer with us. Some make us think. Some make us laugh. And some simply beg the question, what will you do between those two dates? Try to make it a great story.